Hi guys, welcome back. Today I would like to show you something that I've been working on for quite a while now, and I think it's quite interesting. I think you'll also find it interesting. So if you look here, I've created a new project, and in here I just have three files. One's API JSON, config YAML, and Docker Compose YAML. So what I'm really trying to show you here is that I have, or I've been working more or less on a Docker image that you can basically use to do most of your um, server, or if you would like to mock like a server, for example. The point is that this would help you to replicate most, if not all, of the possible features that your backend app, for example, would have or do have if you've already built it. And the point is that I wanted to make it a lot more easier and kind of like decouple the dependence between, say, your front end work and the back end, and you get the opportunity to work much faster, basically. And that's also what I've done here. I've created a quite interesting project that is supposed to help you achieve that. Of course, it's still in the development phase. There are obviously a lot of bugs that are still in there, and it's definitely still actively developing. But the point is that at this point you can already use it to play around with it and just maybe also give me feedbacks if you have one for me. So the interesting thing, of course, is that if you have an API that you hope to build, for example, and you would want to test it, so pretty straightforward. You have like an API JSON or API YAML, depending on how you define your API, basically. And for this example, I've just created this simple fake API. So there are like two main endpoints, slash users and slash products. And on the users, I have just a get. And but under products, I think I have more. I have get, I have delete, I have post, and I have put. I think that's all. So all in total, I have like five APIs. So the point is like if I wanted to test what this API would look like in the end, or maybe I just want to focus on working on the front end and not just maybe generate some fake data, but actually talk to an actual server. That's really where this comes in. So all you need to do to actually use this is basically define or write your API JSON and then create a config YAML file to add some configuration information, and that's it. Basically, you just set up your Docker Compose, which of course this is not necessary. You can just use the terminal and write and run the Docker command right from there. It doesn't even need to be in there. So in the end, basically what you need is your API definitions and your config YAML. So, but I'm just going to use Docker Compose to make things a lot easier in this tutorial, so you can also have an idea of what I'm doing. So I would of course have services in here. I'm just gonna have one thing. I'm just gonna call this app, and for this the image can be found here. So go to, it's called mock meister, and we'll pull the latest image. And apart from this, I would also, it is also necessary to attach some volumes. So I would also like to mount these files, the API JSON itself, and of course the config YAML. So I'm going to create a volumes section. So for what's that? For type, I'm just going to make this bind and source. So source, I'm going to provide the path. So I'm going to first add the config YAML. And targets where I would like this to be, of course, would be, I'm just going to call it the exact same thing to make it easier for our mock server to find it. So again, type would be bind, and I need to provide the source one more time. So the source here again would be, we'll go to api.json, and again, target, I need to basically point where I would like to have this, so api.json. And that's mostly all I need to mount. The next interesting, of course, is to define ports where my app will run. So I'm just gonna say 8080, and again, another interesting thing, of course, would be to provide some environment variables. So it's interesting to provide config file name, and in this case, what did I do? this would be, of course, config.yaml. So again, it has to be consistent with what you have created locally. If you have this under a separate name, it also makes sense to stay consistent. So we have OpenAPI spec name, and again, OPI.json. And that's mostly it. So this is already enough to run I don't think. Okay, maybe just just to make it interesting, I'm gonna create a network section. I'm gonna call it app network, and the driver I would use would be bridge. And now I can come down here and add network section, and I'm just gonna bring up our network, call it app network. So that's basically all we need actually to have this whole thing set up. Now, of course, in the config YAML, this is where this is actually quite interesting. So it's, again, I'm going to provide, of course, the URL to this Docker image. It's actually on Docker Hub, so you can read through this, and please feel free to give me feedback. So if you look through here, you will see some of the features this should have in the end. Some of them, of course, are still ongoing, but most of them are there already. So we have, of course, OpenAPI support, configuration driven. So there is support for authentication. There is also plans to have database integration. So in the end, I actually want this to be like an actual server. And if it behaves, or more or less if it goes in the direction I'm expecting it to go, I also want to basically build like a tool in the Rust where you can simply pull a Docker image, provide an API JSON, and you have a fully production grade functioning server. That's also more or less like the next step of what I'm trying to do. But anyways, it should have WebSocket support, webhooks, cores, login, routes, to if you want to specify some ignore some routes, for example. I want to have support for plugins, metric scripting. There is really a lot more I would like to have, and the main reason actually for additional things like this, especially let's say plugin support and scripting, is the other story that I'm telling, which is that I would like this to have to for the user more or less have the option to actually, or to for me to build something in the future where you can just pull a Docker image, provide a config YAML and an API JSON, and you have a functioning production grade server. So that's why I add most of more or less why I have these options down here. So what I can also do is maybe pull this side by side, and I can just copy what I see over here into our config YAML to basically for you to see how easy actually it is to set up. So I'm probably just going to copy this part, okay, and I'm not probably not going to change much. So, but it's interesting, of course, you give it any name you want. And right now, I'm really not using a version. I'm still thinking of how I want to use this, but I think just thinking about it, I think they should actually have a version. So that's of course somehow I also would like to tie this, of course, to the Docker image, but I'll have to think about it anyways. So, okay, we have on the server some configuration information. So host, I'm making this O.O.O.O because again, I'm gonna run this for now for this purpose inside a Docker image, obviously, and I don't want to spend time doing any network configuration. So, because if I stipulate, for example, localhost in here 127.0.0.1, then it's of course gonna expose localhost, but that would just be within that Docker container. So to have this, not really not bother about, sorry, to really not bother about that configuration, I'm just opening everything basically. So of course port 8080, and this is also in still under development. So, but I'm just gonna leave this part as is for now. Again, this is where you specify additional information regarding cores. So you actually get to really play around here. If, for example, if the app you hope to build or more or less simulate has some some specific requirements, of course you can stipulate those here. So things like allowed origins, you get to specify ignore, allow, stuff like that, and of course this of course again has to do with of course cookies and all that, so allow credentials. So we have WebSockets. you get to specify, of course, the endpoint you would like the WebSocket, a particular WebSocket to be served, and the same goes for webhooks. So these two are also again still in development, but in the end, the plan would be, of course, that you should be able to specify it as is, and maybe also provide, let's say, a data model or even reference something, or like a schema, for example, in your API JSON, basically for this endpoint to know which data to stream back to you via a WebSocket connection, and of course also get to specify. You will get to specify, for example, the frequency you would want to get this data. So again, this part is still under development, but that's already planned basically. So this section, of course, has to do with our Open API. This is also quite interesting. So again, I'm just going to copy this whole thing and dump them here. So we have Open API, the spec path, hot reload. Again, this is again still under development. I'm just going to write this there. So validation enabled, dynamic response, of course. So let's get to auth. I'm just going to copy this again, come down here. So on the auth, you define if you would want to enable auth, and you also define like the kind of auth token you would like, auth type. So in this case, I'm using token. Of course, that should be possible for things like cookies. I have to again look through my documentation to know what are the possible options. But again, you have cookies, you have token, and I don't remember the rest. But let's keep it simple. And then in this case, if I'm using token, I get to specify additional information. So I want to have, for example, this will be my more or less my secure token value. Can it be anything you want to call this? Really, it can be some long string, whatever you want to put in here. And then you also need to specify the source. Because the server needs to know where to look for this secret. So should it look for it in the header or in the cookie or whatever? Anyways, so other than that, we have the protected route section. So here again, it's basically what it sounds like. You get to provide routes that you would expect to be protected. So that's for anyone who needs to visit those routes has to, of course, fulfill these requirements here. So you get the point. That's really the point. So we have this database. I'm just gonna basically copy everything. Actually, I'm just gonna copy everything and put them in here. And so again, this is, like I said, still under development, but the point is that I want to make it so possible that you can, if you want data persistence, because you have this option here to set this to true or false. If you don't provide, of course, it will be set to false by default. So, but if you would like to have this, you at the end there's going to be option for SQLite. That would be Postgres. That would be regular MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, and there should also be sorry, MySQL and MS SQL. So there would be these options in the end. So you get to plug in or provide your own database credentials. Or even if you want to do that here, you get to create another service here. Maybe that will be a Postgres or whatever database. And then, of course, provide those credentials. And then those credentials, of course, you would be able to provide them in here, maybe as just as a connection string. As we have here. But again, it's still coming along, trust me, but this is already being developed. And maybe I just make this full screen so you can see everything one more time. And then there is login, of course, and there is endpoints we would like to ignore, for example, and we would basically play around with all of this right now. And then there's metrics. So that's really it. All you need to do, like I said, is provide an API JSON, basically specifying your endpoints, the schemas. You already know how to, guessing you already know how to work with API definitions. And once you have this provided, and then come to config YAML and provide all the necessary information. And that's really it. You have a server. Now I can actually just open the terminal and say something like Docker compose up and say build. And let's see. I think we have a mistake. So Docker compose YAML ports must be a list. So let's go to add. Of course, this should be a list. So it has to be like this. So now I try to, of course, run our app. So say Docker compose up and add the build flag, and we are able to, of course, put the image. I have this already running locally, and then this should already be up. So if I should maybe do like a Docker PS, you would see that um, we are running this image here locally, and of course it's just been up like 2 seconds ago, and this is where we can have this running. So we can do a little bit of test just to see if everything is behaving the way we expect them to. So I'm just going to close the terminal and bring up another web page so we can have a look. So what I can do is to go to rec bin, for example, and then we go to, maybe I just make this again. I'll make this half screen so we can have this together side by side, and maybe make it a little bit smaller so I have some room. And now I can go back to my config YAML. Okay, so more or less, let's look at the API JSON. So we have /users. So I'm just gonna go to here. So I'm just gonna go to. So now I can try to test this server by going to HTTP localhost on the 8080, and then we'll go to /users, and then make a request. And as you can see here, we get an unauthorized 401. And again, that's also because, of course, we are pretty sure that endpoint exists, because you can see here we have /users and there's a get. But in our config, we have specified under auth that every endpoint going through /users, for example, would be protected. So what it means is that if we should comment this out and open the terminal, for example, and let me restart this server, because the hot reload, it's not yet there, but it's going to be there in the future, hopefully. So now I restart the server, and now if I go back here, it's going to go through, as you can see, quite straightforward. And of course, this is just simulated data, and email ID name is basically based off of, if you go to the API schema and see here, we are referencing this component schema user. And if we go to component schema user, now we see we have just ID, name, email, and that's also where we get your email ID name. So don't worry about this number, which is a little bit weird for now. It's um, just how the random number is being generated, but it would, of course, be fixed in the future. But the point is that if I should change anything in this schema, for example, if I, let's say I just copy this just to show you this also, I copy this and just add another thing here, and I call this, I don't know, address, and maybe call it string as well. And all I need to do now is restart the server, for example. And now you can see it would happen like magic. And just to tell you, this is purely dynamic. It's not hard coded or anything. So if I restart the server now and make this request one more time, now you see it gets updated automatically. It's purely dynamic based off of what is inside your API JSON. And it's also quite done pretty well. If you also look here, the bundle size is also quite small. I can say Docker images. And you cannot see here, if I can find it, it's actually quite small. It's just about 8.5 MB. So it's the bundling was actually done pretty well, so that's the size was as small as possible. But just as you can see right here, it's purely dynamic. If you should change anything in here, that's exactly going to be updated automatically, and that's when you're going to get back. So but if we should go back to our config and make this go to under auth, and again make this a protected route, and of course what we had before would be the case one more time. So now it's going to be unauthorized. But anyways, now if we, like I was showing you before, because /users is under our protected routes, if we try to visit it right now, we get an unauthorized um, 401 response code. But if we want this to still go through with users having having to be a protected route, we're going to have to just come back to see how we define our auth. So we said we want to provide a token which is going to be in the header. So I'm just going to go to the header, for example, now, and specify authorization, if I can spell. And I simply just copy this string here. Again, it can be whatever you want it to be. And then I send the request. And now I get 404 not found. Why is that? Let me see. Oh, because we are ignoring these users. Okay, so now I see another thing that I need to update. So apparently we are verifying auth before we verify the users anyways. But I can take this out, for example, now and restart the server. And now this should, of course, go through. So if I make a request now, it should go through, and of course you see our schema has been updated. The reason why we got the error before, I can already imagine, is because we do an authorization authentication verification before we make the actual request. So, but if I should ignore this, again, this would of course not go through. So if I leave this of course for you to play around. So again, we have products. If we go to product slash 23, we are going to get 404 because also we have that here being ignored. So what I can also do is maybe just leave an empty string in here and restart this one more time. And now products should also now be going through. So let's start it one more time. So now if we go to product slash any number, because we are not really using this, so it can actually be anything, it doesn't matter. And we now should be able to get our product. Again, if we go back to our OpenAPI definition, this is product, it has an ID, product name, and price. Again, just like I showed you, that this is purely dynamic. We can give this another value, and I can call this product type, and maybe I'll just say this is going to be a string, for example, doesn't really matter. And I stop the server. Now you see why hot reload would be quite interesting. So now, but if I make the request one more time, you also see here that gets updated automatically. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. So I leave it for you to play around to also find bugs. Again, we can also test some other things out. So we have get, we have post, and again, post, we have this schema which is called product input. So if I go to the definition, you should have product name and price, and I can just copy those product name and price. So, and I change this to post, and I go to body, so JSON, and just to show you, it's I could say product name, and call it whatever, doesn't really matter, and price, maybe 23. And of course I can remove that, and then I can make a request, and then of course I get a response back, because again, that's what I'm returning. So that's really something I expect you to, of course, maybe go ahead and play around with. If of course if you notice any bugs or whatever, please really feel free to reach out to me. I would really love to hear your feedbacks on what you think, or what features you think I should put in there to make it even more usable. But I think you can already see the idea of this. You can easily spin up a server. It doesn't actually take a lot of your resources because of how it was actually really built. So, like I said, feel free to play around with this, and I would be really looking forward to hearing your feedbacks on what you find, and what features you would expect me to have in here. And I would, of course, listen and respond to each of you that's would be so kind to leave a comment or a suggestion to me. Anyways, guys, that's what I wanted to show you in this tutorial. So until we see each other again, of course, if you're new, please go ahead, subscribe, and I promise you I will always bring you interesting topics. Anyways, until next time, guys, have a lovely evening, and bye-bye.